Back a couple of days before the last balance tuning in the Midnight Beta, before Blizzard went on a Christmas vacation, we were saying this. Obviously with the point about Prot Paladin soon to be buffed, likely going up to A, if not more, in terms of power level, and actually things have been turned out this way, if not even slightly more positive for Protection Paladin. As of right now, they have climbed the ranks to be the most popular of the tanks in Mythic Plus after their set of buffs they have received. They have now risen to become the strongest tank in the beta. So, as always, since we are getting close to the Midnight pre-patch of the War Within, more players are starting to get interested in what to play for the next expansion. Therefore, we have a new powerful tank in the midst for the Midnight Beta, so we have to go and look at what has changed for the spec, what has made them much stronger compared to where they were before. Looking at how they play now, what have gotten them to be so strong, what has changed from the War Within, the quality of life that Blizzard has put for the spec. Now, based on their buffs first, the biggest of the positive changes from the last set of balance tuning mid-December was none of these shiny buffs like cooldown reduction and healing increases, was the more boring and straightforward Ages of Light armor increased from 20% to 55%, and armor granted by Shield of the Righteous increased by a flat 30%. This is very visible even now in-game. You look at the base armor, for example, of a Prot Warrior, which gives you in the realm of 55% damage reduction. You have a base armor with Bone Shield of a Blood Decay. It's also in the 55% realm. Druid with a single stack of Iron Fur. It's in the 55% realm of armor. And now you have Paladin. Base armor also up to 55% now. And this is after getting its base armor increased from their passive from 20 to 55%. Now it has been normalized with the rest of the tanks. Also, of course, Paladin now as a form of a defensive also has Shield of the Righteous, which armor has also been increased by 30%. So now with shield buff active, you are above 70% physical damage reduction. This is the main basic strongest buff you have received in terms of straightforward and more streamlined damage taken as a paladin. Now your health, your health over time, for example, in a Mythic Plus key is more stable as a tank. It is more smooth. It is similar now, more reminiscent of the health bars of like Vengeance, Demon Hunter, of Prot Warrior, of Guardian Druid even. The base armor buff might have been the more boring one of the changes, but it has turned out to be the strongest one. Now, in terms of other changes though, we have to move away for a second from the actual buffs and talk about the quality of life you have received from the War Within in general, because for starters, the biggest W going from the War Within to this expansion is your mastery. Now, your mastery, your new mastery, is no longer tied to consecration. You still gain bonus attack power, you still gain chance to block based on your mastery, you still gain extra chance to block, double your mastery value of harmful spells and magical dots that can now be blocked. This was the Holy Shield talent which has been cooked into your mastery. So what the mastery gives you is about the same, but now it's no longer tied to consecration. So you won't have the mega downside of constantly having to be in consecration. Now, effectively, you don't even need to stay in consecration. Besides having the damage of consecration and the healing of consecration, you won't lose some massive block ratio as also damage reduction. Now, the biggest thing you will lose from not being in consecration is the talent Sanctuary, which gives you 5% damage reduction. And even then, you still have a 4-second grace period of reactivating consecration before you lose this 5% damage reduction. But comparing what you were losing in the War Within, if you were out of consecration, this is a massive win. Talking about massive wins, your Word of Glory now has taken away any problems and issues of running out of mana, which was a legitimate problem of Prot Paladin if they were spamming a Word of Glory to heal themselves, because now Word of Glory restores 100% of the mana cost it refunded if you cast it on yourself. So you don't have to worry pretty much about mana ever again. Now, it might feel bad at first, but getting pruned in buttons wasn't even that bad of an idea for Prot Paladin, because you already had quite a few in terms of your damage rotation, which is getting smoothened out in Midnight by partially losing Hammer of Wrath. I know, iconic cooldown, iconic button, iconic sound and effect, etc, but now it's cooked into your wings. It replaces Judgment when you enter Avenging Wrath, so it's no longer its own standalone button. It's the upgraded version of your Judgment. You do have other QoLs, like for example losing the Fate in the Light passive, so you no longer have to work around this Word of Glory every 6 seconds to keep the uptime of the extra 5% block. You know, this maintenance kind of buffs to keep track of, part of Blizzard's, plans to smoothen out specs. This was a good change for Prot Paladin. What is then going to finish the list of your QoL changes is the extra self-healing that you are gaining on top of the recently buffed extra base armor. We mentioned the base armor makes you take less damage overall because, armor stops physical damage. In case you don't know, always as a reminder, physical damage is going to be something like 85 plus 90% even of all the damage you are taking in a Mythic Plus key as a tank. Melee auto attacks is the default damage you take most of the time, so having tons of armor for physical damage is always a good thing. You are gaining Undying Embers, which heals you for 100% of Refining Fire now. Refining Fire is the already existing talent in the War Within, very good existing talent, which makes Avenger's Shield also create a dot based on 100% of the damage you did. Now that dot damage also heals you. And then you have Solace, which makes Consecration heal you for 100% of the damage done. Both of these new talent additions will be responsible for nearly 20% or 20% or so of your own self-healing. So with the base armor increase, making you be more resistant to physical damage plus the extra self-healing, it makes it much more smooth and straightforward for you to be taking damage and self-healing yourself in most Mythic Plus keys. What of course then finishes your own self-healing, going back to the list of buffs you have received, is the doubling, the literal doubling, 100% increase of the healing done of Word of Glory. On top of the other talent buffed Light of the Titans, causing Word of Glory to heal for an additional 40% over time instead of 20%. As well as the buffed to Solace, which was no longer 100% damage increase from Consecration damage, but 300% healing based on the damage done by Consecration. This has created an interesting situation where now Protection Paladin is one of the tanks using the least amount of defensive buttons while using your normal rotation as a tank. If you look at this, pretty much all of these things self-healing you are happening passively, are happening as you click damage buttons, as you are doing damage, and you're not actively having to think to defend yourself. You do have Word of Glory, of course, that you actively have to press, but all of the rest of the things, like your Mastery, your Holy Bulwark, or Tempered in Battle from your Lightsmith hero talent, Undying Embers from your Avenger's Shield, or Consecration self-healing, it's all happening as you're trying to do damage. If you compare the buttons other specs have to click for the sole purpose of defending themselves, you have Prot Warrior that has to click, Spell Reflection, Demo Shout, Shield Block, and tons of Ignore Pain clicks. Guardian Druid has to cast a ton of Iron First for defense. You have Brewmaster Monk that has Purifying Brew, Celestial Brew, Vivify, Expel Harm. Meanwhile, Prot Paladin just has Word of Glory. The rest are all offensive buttons. It will feel quite new if you have never played Prot Paladin but you're used to playing tanks, or you have played other tanks, because it will feel, especially if you haven't gotten the spec, somewhat alien to not have a clear and straightforward set of buttons you have to click to defend yourself. Because most of your self-defense, most of your self-healing will happen naturally, even as you're pulling 10 different mobs and you're taking tons of damage. A lot of the self-healing will just happen as you're doing damage. So it will be also kind of harder to know what you're doing wrong, or what you had to click, what you had to do better as a tank when you're playing Prot Paladin compared to, for example, when you're playing Prot Warrior. Did I have my shield block up? Was I dumping my rage on my ignore pain to absorb damage taken? It's much more simple to realize the possible mistakes you might have done compared to Prot Paladin, that doesn't have that much of a clear divide between defensive buttons and offensive buttons. They are much more blurred between one another. Now, going of course in Midnight does add some layer of complexity, because having your Apex talent does give Judgment unempowered. It gives you a buff called Vanguard, which means your next Avenger Shield does more damage. But what you need to track this for is because the next Avenger Shield, when you consume this buff, gives you 3 extra Holy Power. So obviously, given that you have 5 max Holy Power, you kind of want to track this buff, because then you don't want to overcap in Holy Power. You don't want to use your Avenger Shield buffed by this Apex talent when you have 3, 4 or 5 Holy Powers in you. Especially when you enter Wings, because when you enter Avenging Wrath, your Avenger Shield will always benefit from Vanguard. So you will always get this 3 bonus Holy Power in Wings from your Avenger Shield. So it does change, it does add something extra in your rotation, or something you have to keep track of as a set of Apex talents as a Prot Paladin. So with the loss, I guess we can say with the replacement, temporary replacement of your Hammer of Wrath coming up only when you are in Wings, what you're left with are the usual buttons. Even if we are in a new expansion with these changes, you're still going to normally press Shield of the Righteous, Blessed Hammer, Judgment, and Avenger Shield as your 4 main buttons, remembering to keep up Consecration as a button, even though, as we mentioned, is no longer nearly as necessary as it was before, with the Word of Glory now being much more powerful, healing for much more, and also not having to worry about going out of mana if you are pressing Word of Glory excessively. It can definitely feel overwhelming when you are in Wings, which will be nearly, not quite 50% of the time, but some 35 to 40% of your entire Mythic Plus key, you will be in Wings, for the simple fact that your Wings on average will last some 25-ish seconds on a 1-minute cooldown. So you press Wings, Wings goes on a 1-minute cooldown, 25 seconds later Wings ends, and you have 35 seconds left on the cooldown. So the uptime is quite high. And what can happen during Wings is quite often some level of overflow of Holy Powers. It does get and can get very overflowy in the amount of Holy Power you generate, and as a result the Holy Power you're gonna waste because you're generating so much. After all, you do have Shining Light, which is going to contribute to a lot, to most of your Word of Glories being free. You don't even have to spend Holy Power for them. You have Divine Purpose, which can make your spenders free. Avenger Shield by itself is not consuming Holy Power, and when you are inside of Wings, it will generate 3 Holy Power. So it can feel sometimes like you're overflowing with a lot of Holy Power during your Wings windows. You're gonna have a lot of Shield of the Righteous spam due to the amount of Holy Power you are generating, which is good, you know. Shield of the Righteous does good damage and keeps you up your armor after the buff is now even stronger. Now you have lost cooldowns overall, because Bastion of Light and Moment of Glory and Eye of Tear are no longer available cooldowns in your talent tree, but you have gotten CDR in your buffs as the remaining parts of your buffs. Ardent Defender went from a 2-minute cooldown to a 1.5-minute cooldown, and thanks to Unbreakable Spirit reducing the cooldown of Ardent Defender by 30%, now it's a 63-second cooldown. Plus you have Guardian of Ancient Kings now has 2 charges, and now the base cooldown is down to 3 minutes, and you still have Gift of the Golden Valkyr reducing the cooldown of your Guardian, which will bring it down from 3 to 2-minute cooldown. So you can get a 2-minute CDR of Guardian of Ancient Kings, a 1-minute CDR on other Defender, a 1-minute CDR on your Wings, and you still have your 3.5-minute cooldown bubble that you can benefit from, on top of your already existing Divine Toll, which is still there as a 1-minute cooldown. Now, with all of the changes being positive, if we have to mention one of the problems of the spec at the moment, even after this line of buffs, is the fact that right now Lightsmith is light years ahead of the opposition of Templar as a viable hero talent. You have tons of options in here that are just far too strong for you, whether it is the self-healing generated by Tempered in Battle and by Divine Guidance, the extra healing from your Consecration, and the shared healing of Tempered in Battle, extra basic healing thanks to Holy Armaments with Holy Bulwark giving you an Absorb Shield. All of these are going to contribute quite a lot to your self-healing, on top of the contribution of the damage of things like Hammer and Anvil, as well as the more extra damage with the Blessing of the Forge, free sacred weapons inside of Wings. All of this is just far too strong as a hero talent compared to Templar, which hasn't received any buffs in weeks and months, or really just at any time throughout this beta of Midnight. Lightsmith is still far too strong compared to Templar for Prot Paladin. Now, in terms of options in your talent tree, you don't actually have many. You have the joke talents, which are absolutely horrible for Avenger's Shield, which you might at best use in a single target raid encounter, and that's about it. No other purpose for these buttons. This one is decent, but not worth a talent point in the last bracket of your talents. You know, if it was here or here or here, it was more reasonable, but not in this bracket of talents. And this one is an abomination. Putting your Shield of the Righteous to do 100% more damage, but costing 5 Holy Power is awful. It's too much of a cost, especially given you gain more by casting more individual Shield of the Righteouses instead of a single huge one. It would be even better for you if you could cast Shield of the Righteous costing 1 Holy Power, doing a third of the damage, rather than doing a 5 cost Holy Power doing twice the damage, because the more casts, for example, you proc more Divine Purposes, you proc more extensions of the armor buff because you're casting more Shields of the Righteous instead of casting a single one for 5 Holy Power is just awful. So basically all of these talents are just a non-question for Prot Paladin. You have a couple of options if you had the free talents to float around, like giving you very good QoL, giving you free Shield of the Righteous as your Divine Steed, so you can enter a new pack in Mythic Plus guaranteed having your armor buff. You know, if you finish a pack without the Holy Power, you don't have to manage having enough Holy Power before entering a new pack because you're just using Divine Steed to gain the buff. It's quite good. And then some free extra damage from your Consecration. These are decent enough that you might think about picking. The problem is that you have to get to this buff, to the 5% damage reduction, which requires you to take Vision of Sanctity, which is awful. It is completely terrible, but since this one takes 2 talent points to fully take instead of 1, you can't just take 1 and get here. You have to take this worthless talent. And you also have to take this worthless talent, which can be some decent QoL, I guess, but this wouldn't make your Word of Glory benefit from the buff of the 300% increased healing on yourself. So it's not really almost ever you actually click Word of Glory consistently on other players, but if you want to get down there, you have to essentially waste these 2 talent points to reach it. That's the only annoyance in the talent tree of Prot Paladin. But besides the slight problem in your talent tree and the problem of your hero talent being massively lopsided towards Lightsmith, all of the changes have been very positive. You have slimmed down your rotation slightly without having to add a button for Hammer of Wrath now being cooked into Judgment when you are in Wings. You have gotten tons of defensive buffs, passive, background working defensive buffs, armor increase to make your damage intake more smooth, more constant self-healing from Consecration damage, from Avenger's Shield damage to give you higher self-healing and therefore make your damage intake more smooth because you're healing more of it passively. Now you're much more stable as a tank when it comes to your health bar. You don't have to worry about nearly as much about defensive buttons to press. Unlike most of the other tank specs, you have lost many of the annoying things to keep track of and maintenance rotational buffs like 1 Word of Glory every 6 seconds to keep up your block increase, stay inside Consecration at all times, don't spam too many Word of Glories or you go out of mana. All of these things are gone, which are very positive. Overall, all of these changes have been very good for the spec, and after the buffs it has now become the most popular and we can say for right now the most powerful of the tank specs for now in the Mythic Plus for Midnight's beta. So these have been the upgraded set of changes for Prot Paladin for right now, at least as far as tuning goes. Now that Blizzard is coming back from their holidays, their break of Christmas and New Year's, we will start seeing again more balanced tuning. We'll see what they think about these changes they have given out to the spec, but for now it is looking very good for the next expansion as a tank. So with this out of the way, we can now leave each other for today on the start of this new week, on this Monday. We are now leaving each other by saying our goodbyes, thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, oh, my weather report. We have a snow alarm coming. Yeah, the snow alarm is coming about 2 weeks too late, but better late than never, I guess.